What's up, everyone, and welcome back to episode number 6 of the Unfiltered podcast. As always, I am your lovely host, Matthew Francis, and I'm joined by my debatably alright co host, Alex Pierce. What's going on, Alex?
A dick, first off. Hi, everyone. This is gonna be an episode that it's gonna be a little sad.
It is unfortunately going to be a sadder episode, but we think that it's important to bring out these topics, and recap a little and talk about basically the stuff that everyone's talking about in one place. A bunch of different topics are going to come together, and we're going to throw in some current news, but a lot of this is going to be kind of a recap in a way, and we'll get to that in a little while. But today's episode, we're going to start right off on the top with a major but yet very sad topic here in the United States, and that's the Supreme Court. For those of you who don't know or haven't been following along, or from a different country, whatever, Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States. They make a lot of big rulings, from Miranda rights to
Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, and segregation, and you name it. And unfortunately, last Friday, September 18th, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Supreme Court justice and overall amazing human being, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, passed away. She was 87. It was from complications with cancer, and she's had cancer for a long time on and off, and unfortunately they weren't able to get it all and whatnot. So unfortunately she did pass away, which for me is a heartbreaking thing to hear and to say, because she was an amazing human being. I mean, like I was telling Alex before we started recording, no matter who you were, no matter what opinion you had, what side you were on, you could always be friends with Ruth. If you look at some of the biggest political leaders in the United States history within the past 27 years?
She's been serving in the federal court system since the 70s.
Yeah. So in the last 20, 30 years, some of the biggest political figures, all the way up to Donald Trump, have been able to put their differences aside with her and just be, I'm not going to call them friends, but acquaintances, friends, whatever you want to call them, and just be able to get along. And that's not something, especially in the federal system, that you can see a lot. So I know Alex has some stuff he wants to say, so Alex, why don't you take it away?
What? There's so many things that can be said about Justice Ginsburg. She was a liberal lion, an icon of the court, and definitely one of the court's greatest heroes. She put, above all, what was best for the people at the forefront of her decisions. One of the best examples of this is she, in 2016, before Trump was elected, she called him a fake and a phony. But a few days later, on her own accord, when she could have just stuck by that because she was a liberal, she apologized and said that's not something that a judge should say, and that's very emblematic of who she was. She did what a judge should do, and she was nominated to the court in '93 by Clinton, and every president since Clinton, even before she was nominated to the court, when she was just a district court judge, has had nothing but great things to say about her. Her loss is something that is going to be felt for a long time, and especially when you consider that the GOP want to replace her right away. Now, I have my own issues with this because of my view of the Supreme Court. I believe that the Supreme Court should be split four liberal, four conservative, and then one who he may lean conservative, he may lean liberal, and Justice Roberts is perfect in that role as the deciding vote. If they do put in their nominee, it's going to make it an overwhelmingly conservative court, and that's not something that should happen. And they made a case in 16, the GOP made a case in 16 that president who's coming up on election shouldn't be able to appoint a nominee 60 days before their election. We are 60 days before 2016. I mean, Jesus, brain is not working today. 60 days before the 2020 presidential election, regardless if Trump wins or loses, and there's a possibility of both, they should at least wait till that court seat until after the election when we know, okay, who's going to be president.
Well,
What do you think?
here's my thing on it. We're obviously in a time of large differences right now, whether it be racial differences, black versus white, or differences between the United States and another nation, whatever. There's a lot of differences going on right now, and we're seeing a lot of former differences too. If we flash back to the Obama presidency, with gay rights and equal, marriage for the LGBTQ community, we're seeing some of that come up again now, especially in the last couple weeks, and it's tying into some of the issues with former Supreme Court rulings and some of the racial issues now. And I think it's important to have a full panel of judges. While I agree that it could be mistaken, not necessarily mistaken, but wrong to appoint someone within a certain time period of an election, whatever, it's a catch-22. If he does appoint someone or nominate someone, people are going to say, well, why didn't you wait? But if he doesn't appoint someone and something happens or a ruling isn't, fair, it's not done properly, whatever, people are going to criticize the president for saying, well, why didn't you appoint someone? Right? So it's a catch-22 on that aspect. President Trump did say that he was making his nomination Saturday. He's going to make it this Saturday in the afternoon at some point. He made that announcement today. Whether that's actually going to go through or not, I don't know. But I think it is important that there is a full panel up there, regardless of whether it's half conservative, half not, half liberal, whatever. And that doesn't matter. It's ultimately up to the president to nominate someone and them to go through the process of appointment. But I personally believe that it's, especially in the times that we've seen this year and with the many issues that have arisen, and many of these issues have been held in previous Supreme Court rulings, I think it's important to have a full panel up there regardless of when an election is. If we flash back to 2016, yes, there was some major issues. Again, we saw some of the racial things, racial issues. We saw some equal rights issues, but I don't think it was really to the caliber it is today. And granted, I don't know the Supreme Court cases right now. I haven't looked into that. But it's going to be important to have a full panel. And we all know the appointment process. I mean, look what Brett Kavanaugh, how long that took for an appointment to a Supreme Court position. It takes a long time. I mean, it could anywhere be from, 3 weeks to a couple months. And if something happens, you're a couple months out that you don't have a Supreme Court justice there to kind of be that swaying factor and hear everything to its full extent.
See, my views on this lie.
Yes, I agree. It's immensely important that we have a full panel. Um, and a lot of the court cases that they do come up with, we've had months prior, and they do their due diligence. That's one thing that the it's one of the many things that the Supreme Court is great at is they do their due diligence. They look at everything from all aspects. Unfortunately, and I'm saying this out of experience, and knowing politics, and especially Mitch McConnell and Trump, and even Pelosi, if the situation was reversed, the way I do, where right now, for the good of the Supreme Court long term, the good of the American people long term, they need to appoint a liberal leaning judge to balance it out, because the court needs balance, and that's the most important thing. And this is a situation because you can't just evict evict a judge. They're in there for life, and I know that Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump won't look at the overall good of the court. They'll just look at what they want to get done, do it in that way. And I know for a fact that if they appoint another conservative judge, situations, cases like Roe v. Wade, protects the right of privacy for all women. Now, many people consider it as legalizing abortion. It does not, but it legalizes the privacy that women are entitled to. And in cases like LGBTQ rights, equal marriage situation, that's at stake now, and is a monumental thing that needs to stay. Because regardless of how you view politically, it shouldn't matter. It should not have an influence as if a person is gay or any of those. They should have the right to marry whoever they want, regardless. Love is love. I don't give a flying for my language. That's something that needs to stay.
And I mean, I agree. I think the biggest issue, though, is just not necessarily the status of a judge, whether they're conservative, liberal, whatever. I think the biggest issue is going to be the power battle between Republicans and Democrats moving forward with the appointment process. Because ultimately, here's what I think is happening is I think what's happening is it's not about whether or not they're going to appoint someone, whatever. I think it's about who gets appointed. There's obviously a big race going on right now for the presidency, whether it's going to be Trump with Pence as his vice president, or we're going to see Biden and Harris. And they obviously have different views, yes, but it's going to be a power battle between who gets to appoint it. And I think that's why they're trying to hold off. I mean, like you said, we're 60 days out, but realistically, we're more than that, because say Biden does win, right? Until he can officially appoint someone, we're the end of January. We're over 2 months now between the election and the possible appointment of a new justice, which leaves us down to 8, which if something comes up, there's no swaying factor at that point. So it's going to be more of a interesting factor of who's going to appoint it rather than who is getting appointed type of deal.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at after the death of Justice Scalia in 16 or 15, Republicans wouldn't let Obama put his nominee on the court because he was, going out of office, which I do sort of agree with, because, want someone who's going to actually be in power. They let that go for around 10 months until Trump appointed his nominee. So if they can wait 10 months for that, and they can They need to have, it's a double standard with them, especially with Mitch McConnell. It's a double standard, and it's very frustrating because right now we have, now I just looked at it, um conservative wise is four conservative judges and now three liberal judges. John Roberts being in the middle, and I have the utmost respect for John Roberts. He is by far one of the best chief justices we've had. And if you put another conservative on there, I'm afraid that a lot of court cases that are very important for privacy and for equality are going to be overturned. That's not good in the long term.
I agree, but I also think moving forward, what's Biden got to bring to the table, right? What is, he could appoint someone that is either so liberal that doesn't want to hear the other side. And
Well,
then,
here's
and I mean, granted, at that point, we have a mix of, you know, Republican, Democrat, liberal, whatever. But they could be so liberal that they now start swaying the other side. Or they start, whatever. And then it tilts that way, even though it's even. But then again, Trump could do the same thing. And now we're 5-3 and we're kind of in the same issue. So it's one of those where it's like Biden hasn't even brought the issue up, right? I mean, Trump's at least brought it up, started thinking about it, said, I'm going to announce Saturday my nomination, whether that happens or not. He's at least brought it up. He's at least acknowledged it. The only thing I've heard from Biden is what, his response to the death of Justice Ginsburg. But if I was him, I would be saying, well, if they are going to, if the Congress decides we're going to wait, they're not going to appoint someone, they make that decision. Now it falls on him. Granted, he has a little extra time. He's got 3 months to kind of plan and figure out who he wants to appoint, whatever. But now is the time to think about it, right? With Trump bringing out a nomination of possibly on Saturday, it would be the time to start thinking, well, and making it public at least, and saying, well, here's the things. Maybe not, saying I'm going to appoint this person specifically, but saying these are the things that I'm going to look for in someone to appoint.
And see, and here's the thing that part of that reason is, I know Biden would appoint a liberal leaning judge, but he wouldn't appoint a radical liberal leaning judge, and I'll explain that in a minute. But part of the reason is Trump has there's a staff there's a my book's at the other end of my room, so I'm not going to go grab it and look at it. But the president always has a group of staff members that are always monitoring Supreme Court. They're always in contact. They're always looking at, okay, if this person retires or this person dies. So the president has that advantage. They're always ahead of the curve. You don't get that. I don't think the vice president has that. I don't think Vice President Biden has that. I can pretty much assure, even though I don't know for a fact, and Senator Harris are probably looking at who they would want to nominate. And the reason why I say Biden wouldn't nominate an ultra liberal, because he was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I believe the late 70s to until I think early 2000s, or when he became vice president. I don't remember which one. He has, he was tough and rigorous on all of the nominees that he vetted, regardless. And I believe he voted in favor of Clarence Thomas, who's the most conservative leaning judge on the court.
I think, like I said before, I really think this whole thing is going to come down to a political battle between the presidential election, not the Senate, not the people who are getting appointed, or possibly getting appointed, or at least getting nominated. It's going to come down to the political battle. And in the end of the day, it's ultimately up to whoever gets appointed or whoever is the president. And personally, I think that Congress shouldn't, unless there's a legitimate reason where there's legitimate concerns about the appointee, I don't think they should play games and hold back if one does get appointed. Because then that causes a whole nother issue where, say Trump appoints someone, they nominate someone Saturday. Hearings can technically start as soon as Monday if they wanted to. Will it happen? No. But if they stall and they stall and they stall, that just makes Congress look 100 times worse than they already are. I mean, we discussed this last week with just the House of Representatives and the age of who is in there. But it's going to make them look 100 times worse, and then that starts trickling down to the states themselves where these representatives are from, and then it starts trickling down even farther to, districts and counties and all that, because, everything's connected. A town supervisor in a small rural county can have just as much influence in something this major as a senator or as a representative. All because of who they support, who they voted for, and whatnot. And I think if people are playing games, and especially people of power in Congress and even the presidency and the running parties of Biden, Harris, and all of them, if there are people playing with that power, that's not what they should be doing.
Yeah, the Supreme Court's not something to play.
It's not a bargaining chip. It's not a poker chip where you can just throw it in. If you lose $5 on it, you lose $5. No, this is a lifetime appointment, right? It's a extremely special thing. I mean, not everyone gets to do it. I think there's only been just over 100 Supreme Court justices, associate justices. That's huge, right? I mean, if you look at a small county in the middle of Ohio, there's that many justices there alone. So this is a big opportunity. It comes with big power, and with power comes responsibility. And that trickles down to the people appointing them, the people going through the hearings to appoint them, and the people nominating them. And that's why if a nomination does come out Saturday from Trump, I think that they should support that, go through the proper procedures of the appointment process, make sure that everything's good and there's not a major issue like this person is connected to North Korea, and do their due diligence, but do it in a timely manner, without stalling, without causing issues, and without being, a nuisance to the American public. Because ultimately...
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately they already are, but if something happens and there's not a ninth justice and it's major, it could send the country into a civil war because of that one vote. And that all falls back onto people playing games with power that were voted in by the American public.
Agree.
And it sucks that... ultimately, I think personally it sucks that those people, and we talked about this last week, it sucks that the age of a representative or a senator, I would say the average age, and don't quote me on this, I'm just ballparking, is at least 70. 65 to 70. That's an issue when the average age of the public is high 30s.
Yeah.
And I think that is ultimately part of the problem that's going to tie into whether someone should get appointed or not. Because if we have, 60, 70-year-old representatives that are looking at how things should have been done 30 years ago in their prime when they had to appoint someone again, you know, and they're looking at that now, no. Issues are, they might be the same issue, quote, issue, but they're not. They're completely new levels, they're completely different things, and now they're all tying in together and causing bigger issues, and they're just feeding the fire. They're just adding like gasoline on top of a fire.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a good.
yeah, I think we'll conclude there. Let us know your thoughts on that. And I personally haven't looked at people who would be appropriate to nominate.
So yeah, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, but and I haven't really obtained the factor of who I would like to see possibly. But I guess we'll see Saturday what happens with Trump in the afternoon. Apparently, at some point, he hasn't made it an official time, and we'll see whether he nominates someone or doesn't or what. So, moving forward from that, we're gonna go to yet another week of the National Football League. And if you stopped by last week, I was in a really good mood. Buffalo won. Alex was in not so good of a mood because the Eagles had lost to the Washington football team, which we can both agree on is like one of the worst names in the world. But we're going into week 2, and it's a great new week for me. And Alex is even more butthurt this week. Buffalo did pick up another win at Miami. I'm going to touch on that real quick, and then we'll get into the Eagles side of things. But Buffalo looked great. It was a close game.
And it was Miami.
It was Miami, but it was 31-28 game. Buffalo did win, like I said. But I did see a lot of great things in there. Number one, besides Josh Allen, just in general, Miami had fans. They had fans in the stands, and it was great seeing that. Baseball's not doing that. A lot of football teams aren't. I know Buffalo isn't, and that all goes on state restrictions and such. But it was great to see actual live people in the stands. Granted, it wasn't as packed as normal. You still had restrictions and such. But it is Florida, and Florida is different than the rest of the states in a way. But it was great to see actual live people, and I think that affected the game compared to last week when there was just fake crowd noise at a lot of stadiums and on TV. But moving forward from that, Josh Allen, wow, what can I say? Last week he threw over 300 yards. It was like 317, something along those lines. Maybe a little bit more. Which was great because it was the first time since 2016 with Tyrod Taylor that Buffalo had a quarterback that passed for over 300 yards in a single game. He blew it out of the water this week. Over 400 yards of passing this week with 4 passing touchdowns. What can I say? I mean, he did great. Alex? Well, I mean, did you see the game at all, or?
I caught bits and pieces of it because I was in the middle of ranting and raving, so I wasn't really in a football mood. But what I did see, I was impressed.
I was really impressed with just how the team has come together in the off season. Granted, we didn't have a preseason, so that limited things. Training camps were pushed back to where the preseason would normally be, so there was an extended period of time off. And when everyone came back, I think they just came back hungry, ready for a good game, a good season, and in one common goal to attack every team like it's the hardest team in the world. I mean, Do I agree with some of their decisions, like, letting their prize kicker go?
Eh,
No. But
eh.
do I think that they have progressed and moved forward with some things that they need? 100%. And I think they're playing a really good game as a team, not individually. A lot of teams, especially towards the later season, start
Mhm.
figuring out. We started to kind of hot and heavy. They came out, they played like the first 3-4 weeks great, got 4 wins, 3-4 wins, whatever, and then they started getting drained out. I think Buffalo's kind of stepping back, and you see this in Allen too. He's stepping back. He's looking around, and he's taking every opportunity to play the game in the moment and not focus on the next play, the next game, or what's going to happen, in the next 10 seconds. He's
If he misses a throw, he's not letting it affect him. He's going through his
exactly.
A.
And
Okay, B's not there. B's not there. Oh, C. Oh, wait, no, B's open. Okay, boom. And he's going for the easiest plays, and that's
that's
impressive.
what you need. Unless you're playing the last 3 minutes of the game, or even the last 2 minutes, and you got a chance to win. Don't be looking for those long plays unless it's. I mean, if you look and you see someone's like a 30 yards down and there's not a single person near them, take it. But a lot of these younger quarterbacks, like Allen, often look at the plays that
Their
will
first
make
option
them.
isn't there. It's
They, they,
Mayday.
they look at the plays that will make them, quote unquote, the next Tom Brady, the next famous quarterback in history. Allen's not doing that. He's looking for the 9-10 yard plays, get him the first down, keep that clock going. A, it keeps possession with you guys. B, it's not risky. And C, you're maintaining that game time where you had the possession and you're just winding that clock down. And you're taking that possession time away from the other team. And they're playing the smart, short game. And they're doing great. And they're playing, I mean, the receivers are doing good running their routes, getting open as much as possible. And Allen, if there's a mistake with something downfield, like you said, he's not letting it affect him, and he's able to look ahead in the next 3-4 seconds with what's going on, but totally forget about the next eternity after that. He's playing the game in the moment and doing a great, great job with it. Now over to the Eagles, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Want to explain a little what's going on with your Eagles? I see they lost to the Rams, 37-19. What's going on with them this year?
Well, play calling's been a little lackluster, but they have, like you said, we haven't really had a preseason to kind of see, okay, this works, okay, this doesn't, oh, this needs a little bit of touch up. So, they're kind of going into it blind. So play calling I can kind of forgive, although some things are just why. But your quarterback is looking phenomenal. My quarterback's looking like a piece of trash.
Well, I
I
mean,
say I say this nicely because I do like Carson Wentz. I think he's got talent. Got talent for days, and he's a good person. He's making these decisions, and he's throwing the ball in these horrible. There was a pass, and during the third quarter, the Eagles, were down by I think about 6, and they'd come back a little bit, but they were marching, running the ball well. He was making good plays. He was putting the ball where it needed to be, and he was looking good. First and 10 at the 42, I believe. In scoring distance. That would have been a 52-yard field goal, but, okay. First down, not second, not third, not fourth down. Down by 6 points. Need to get desperate. First and 10, and he throws a pass. You look at his legs, it looks like he's doing a split. He throws a bullet pass,
into double coverage in the end zone to a receiver who has not been reliable, who has dropped easy passes last year and this year, is looking like a big disappointment. And what do you think happened? Intercepted. And this is why I love the Eagles fans. Empty stadium, right? Because Philadelphia, they're not allowed to have anyone there. Empty stadium. There were still boos because the sound crew that were pumping in a little bit of crowd noise to give it some atmosphere hit the boo button and booed him off the field. Well, and you get booed by a stadium with no one in it.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. So, do you think this is a offensive coordinator issue, or is this a field issue with the players just not really taking into account what's going on?
So last year in 2018, I thought it was an offensive coordinator issue. Because when you look at 16 and 17, our offensive coordinator was the Colts head coach, Frank Reich. Brilliant offensive mind. Like, he's phenomenal. He's the one that led that comeback in the 90s for the Bills. He was the backup for Jim Kelly against the Titans, I believe. So he's got some pedigree. Well, then they moved over to Mike Groh, who is the offensive coordinator for the Colts now. And the offense took a big step back, especially when Nick Foles left. I thought, okay, get rid of him, it's all fixed. Well, he's gone. Now the offensive duties are squarely in Doug Peterson's control. This isn't an issue with the players. It's not an issue with the coaches. This is an issue strictly with Carson Wentz. He has thrown 20 passes that have missed their targets big time. Like, big time misses. Not, a drop, not a few inches. Big time misses, overthrows, wide right, wide left, whatever. You want to hear a big telling stat about that? 15 of those passes that he's missed badly, overthrows, 15 of them wasn't facing any pressure in the pocket. That was just him on his own. This is a Carson Wentz.
Do you think it's a lack of experience? Do you think it's a kind of a big head issue, or is it just like lack of knowledge of what's going on with their playbook and their just looking out and seeing who's out there to receive a ball?
So I heard something from ESPN today from Sal Paolantonio. Sal Paolantonio is one of the longest serving guys at ESPN. He's been covering the Eagles since the late 70s. So he's been around, and he has been around. He said something that I found very interesting. You know how when a quarterback throws an interception or makes a mistake, and guys are like, "Hey, shake it off. You'll get it next time." You know how that happens?
Yeah.
No one talked to Carson Wentz after that interception. He walked over to the bench. He sat down. No one talked to him. There was no one around him. Only time he talked to someone was when he went to get the tablet to review the tape. No one talked to him. That's very telling, because if the players aren't hyping you up and saying, "Hey, shake it off," that's telling fans, the reporters, and the coaches something about you is rubbing them the wrong way.
Yeah.
And this is an issue that Carson Wentz, he has 5 years. This is year 5 or 6. I think it's year 5. Okay, he should be year 5 with the same head coach. We should be well accustomed to the playbook.
I say after year 1, if not 2, you should be.
Yeah. 1, year 2, especially when you have the same head coach every year. You don't go through that turmoil of changing coaches, learning a new playbook. It's been the same head coach. And this is a Super Bowl winning head coach, a coach who won a Super Bowl in year 2, Nick Foles. Yeah. And Nick Foles looked phenomenal. Phenomenal. I mean, he outdueled Tom Brady. He went pass for pass. Brady threw a beautiful play. Well, Nick Foles threw a beautiful play. Tom Brady dropped the pass that was thrown to him. Nick Foles caught it for a touchdown. Fourth down, before halftime, in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Carson Wentz hasn't even come close to looking as good as Nick Foles did. Last year he made some good plays. There were some plays where I was like, all right, that's Carson Wentz. We got our guy back. Yeah, he was dealing with some injuries for a while, and he dealt with an ACL, and that takes time to come back from. It's been 3 years since that. 3 or 4 years since that. This is strictly on Carson Wentz.
So
if he doesn't get this turned around, me, who is a Wentz supporter, have been since day one, will want the Eagles to bench him for Jalen Hurts, and I'm getting frustrated because he's the reason we've lost 2 games.
I was gonna say that was my next question. Who do you want to see when they trade him come in?
If the time comes and they have to bench him, Jalen Hurts, who was our second round pick, the winner. He was a winner at Alabama. He struggled in the national championship game in 2018, but that wasn't really his fault. He goes to Oklahoma, and the last 2 years at Oklahoma, I can't remember, he won. Period. Won. He can make plays happen with his legs. He's coachable. People like him. Everyone likes him. His teammates like him. And the part that would be the worst reputation of the Eagles, they gave Carson Wentz a 4 or 5 year, $140 million deal. Last year.
I mean, in the end of the day, they could still trade him, and
they can, but that's a lot of money to pay.
It is, but
and
I mean, if you look at it, how much a team is making per game and their income, they could recuperate that.
Income's dropped big this year because of no fans.
It has. I mean, especially for teams like Buffalo and the Eagles, where they aren't allowed to have fans. I mean, Miami and places like that are doing a little bit better because they are able to have, a third to half of their fan base that would normally be there actually in the stadium, so they are getting ticket sales. But in the end of the day, they're still making a bunch of money off ads and sponsorships and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting looking at the schedule for next week. Looks like you guys take on the Bengals, so hopefully you don't lose again.
I swear to God, if we lose to the Bengals and Carson Wentz looks as bad as he has the last 2 weeks, he better be on the bench.
And
Jalen Hurts
I can't wait for next week's podcast because Buffalo takes on the Rams, and if Buffalo wins, I can't wait to smash the Eagles. It's going to be great.
Screw off.
But those are both 1 o'clock games, so we will see next week, and we will have an update on. I'm gonna keep ever see those meters, like how angry someone is from 0 to 10. Last week, Alex was at a 2.5. This week, I'm bumping it up to a 4. And
no, I'm higher.
No, I'm gonna keep you as a 4. Next week, if you lose to the Bengals, you'll definitely go higher. But I'm gonna. Stay tuned next week. That scale, I'm going to bring that scale back. Anyways, moving forward into probably the saddest part of this podcast. And the
Jumanji that someone needs to stop playing.
Yeah, the bad record that's on the record player. Someone's got to take it off. It's screeching too much. But 2020, the year from hell. Alex, why don't you kick us off? January, we're going to go through month by month and just cover the top 1, if sometimes 2, major events for each month worldwide. And there's hundreds more major events this year that we don't have the time. We could do a whole nother 4 hours of just a podcast on this. We're not going to do that. We're going to save your ears and our voices and stuff. But Alex, kick us off. January.
Australian wildfires that devastated I mean, devastated, killing over 1 billion animals. Some of them might be going extinct now because of it, and that was saddening to anybody. Then the part one that hurt the worst to any sports fan, including me, who, generation before me had Michael, the generation after me had LeBron. My generation, we had Kobe. Kobe and his daughter Gigi. That actually made me cry because that was sad.
Yeah, the devastating helicopter crash. I remember watching it, not the crash itself, but the live coverage minutes after it came in. That it was.
I remember I was sitting on my phone and it said something about it. I was like, "There's no way."
Yeah.
Someone had him. There's like no way. Then I'm watching and I grab my laptop, both my laptops, and I'm looking. Okay, has anyone said anything? No. First, it was reported by TMZ, so I was like, okay, this has got to be a hoax. This has got to be fake.
And that's exactly what I thought. Well, when I first saw it, it was reported as just a helicopter crash, right? No one knew what was going on. And I'm like, that sucks. There's helicopter crashes all around the world that kill hundreds of people a year. And it sucks. And then when TMZ came out, you're like, no, you're playing a game on us, right? Like, this is a classic TMZ joke. And then it's true. It's true.
Then Yahoo and NBC, and I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was stunned for like the next 3 days.
Yeah.
Then it broke my heart watching his funeral that they had. King Michael, King Michael Jordan, Shaq, Magic Johnson,
what
Kareem,
really got me was not necessarily the funeral and all that and the services. It was the games that followed. Both his home games that he had front row seats to with his daughter, but games all around the NBA nationwide, taking that moment, and just stopping, reflecting, and just being in that moment. That's what really got me.
It was just, it's one of those, it's like, it's one of those that makes you question, what the hell, is there a God? What the hell, like, why would someone as great as Kobe and as innocent as his daughter?
And the year started off with that, a bombshell. And coincidentally enough, we moved right into February with the gloom of World War III possibly happening, with tensions all around the Middle East high. The
world high.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I mean, if you look at the tensions with Iran, and really you throw a dart at that side of the map and there was a high tension between them and another country, and then you throw Russia and China and North Korea and all the ones that they're there, they're there, and then they start making threats at other countries. That's a pretty serious thing that was kicking off the year. I mean, looking back at it now, I would say it's not as major as some of the other things we're going to cover, but it was definitely a major event that put everyone in fear for about 30 days and really made everyone kind of shit their pants for a minute.
And I remember I was talking to one of my uncles, and I love him to death, but sometimes he looks at the world in a view that I'm like, wow. He goes, what's the big deal? He goes, we took out terrorists. I was like, okay, yeah, we might have taken out a terrorist, but let's look at history, shall we? And I'll get into a little history lesson. In 1914, a Serbian radical assassinated the prince of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Okay, well, here's what happened after that. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Okay, well, Serbia's ally, Russia, declared war on Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary's ally, Germany, declared war on Russia. Russia's allies, Great Britain and France, declared war on Germany.
Yeah.
Then Ottoman Empire declared war on all of them, and boom, we have World War I.
Yeah, I mean,
it happened like that.
It literally happened overnight, and this was something that for a couple nights you were sitting on the edge of your seat wondering if this was actually going to happen and when the first shot was going to be fired. And then we moved into March, the favorite month of everyone in the world. The start of this global pandemic, COVID-19. And don't get me wrong, we knew about it in January and February. But March, that's when things really took off. That's when quarantine came out. That's when the world pretty much stopped turning for a little while. And no one knew what was going on. No one knew the extent of this. And next thing you know, everything shut down. And we're all stuck here looking at computer screens trying to work while not having a mental breakdown between, lunch break and, 5 o'clock when you go home. And that just started that 6-month process all the way till even today. From there, Alex, why don't you take it away with April?
So with April, we had a case of the Ebola outbreak. If COVID wasn't already scary, now we have Ebola back again.
And, it's like 2020 is just throwing a bunch of stuff at us, like virus-wise, because first we started with COVID, right? And now we're at 6 months now at least, if not longer. Then we had a potential of a Ebola outbreak. Last Ebola outbreak was huge. Major. Yeah. That was another almost pandemic. I think they actually classified that as a pandemic in a way. And then as we
get under control.
Yeah, and then as we move forward, we'll talk about another virus plague, outbreak, whatever you want to call it, in the future. From there, we moved to May, which May actually started out good. When we were kind of looking back and reflecting, we really didn't think a whole lot of the first half of May, but we did think a lot about the second half of May. And towards the end,
May started off as smooth.
Yeah, May was actually kind of good, and it actually thought we were going to look up for 2020, and things were actually going to take a turn. Turns out they really kind of didn't, and we had the George Floyd death while in police custody. Now, this was a major incident and sparked outrage, which it should have, across the nation and even across the world. There was other countries holding rallies in support for, justice, which I completely agree with. But then it sparked protests and, the lighting of police stations on fire and the lighting of buildings on fire and police cars and fire trucks and you name it. And thankfully, that has kind of settled down, but protests are still active, which they should be. I fully support change in something like this, but it kind of sparked from May into June, these increased racial tensions.
Yeah, that basically are still continuing, but slowing a little.
Yeah, we're starting to see calmer situations now, and moving into the first couple weeks of June with the racial tensions already being high from the past, 10 years, they took another step up, and in June, that's when we really saw the increase in protests, increase in riots. We saw Portland, Oregon, their stronghold there is, I believe, what they were calling it. And just the increase in activity for racial justice and just justice in general. And then from there, we moved into July. And this is what I was talking about with another plague virus outbreak type deal. Because COVID wasn't worse enough. Ebola, a possible Ebola outbreak wasn't worse enough. Now we're talking about a possible outbreak of the bubonic plague.
For those of you that don't know what the bubonic plague is, as I am the resident history guy, it is what killed millions of people in the 1600s, and up till COVID hit, was considered the worst outbreak and disease in the history of mankind.
It was bad. It was huge. And there was yet a confirmed case of it, this time in Mongolia. And there was a concern that they weren't going to be able to contain it to just that one person. And it was going to become a next pandemic on top of COVID-19, and that would just complicate everything with COVID-19 alone. But a plague is different from other things. You know, it reproduces overnight, and that bacteria is not like COVID where it takes 7 to 14 days to see symptoms. No, you will wake up and you will feel it. You will see it.
The worst part is it's spread by like rats and fleas.
Yeah. So places like, you know, China or even cities, like if you look at New York City or Los Angeles.
Big old rat.
Yeah, I mean, those places, one rat could affect millions. And next thing you know, those people start infecting others, and it just escalates from there.
Then we go into...
Yeah, once that was contained, we moved into August. And this was another kind of like round in the chamber, because if January was... You see a trend here, right, people? If January wasn't enough... So, actually... We'll talk about this at the end.
Trend here.
But there's kind of a 3-month trend in a way, if you look at it. So it starts, January. You had the wildfires, and then you had the tragic death of Kobe and Gigi Bryant. February, you had a major...
World War.
Yeah, a war, basically, whether it be political or not. And then March, you had an outbreak. Moving forward, April... You had an outbreak. May, you had a death, George Floyd. June,
that
you had
sparked the Civil War.
Yeah, you had racial tensions in this almost civil war. Moving into July, we had another outbreak of bubonic plague. Now in August, the whole western part of the United States is on fire, from California to Oregon to Colorado and Washington State. Just like January with the wildfires in Australia. Huge devastation. I mean, millions of acres, millions of people displaced. Air quality is so low. Us on the East Coast are feeling the air quality difference. I mean, it's huge. And then we move into September with yet
another tragic death.
Another death with Justice Ginsburg and her, you know, horrible,
legendary.
Yeah, her legendary service and her horrible feeling of hearing that she passed. And yet, we're on to yet a second wave of COVID, this time in schools. It doesn't stop.
In the end of August, when some of the very first school that opened up classes, very first day, they had a COVID case.
I mean... It's so... Schools are breeding grounds, especially colleges. Local schools are different because it's local people. But colleges, I mean...
People from all across the country.
Yeah, even international students. So we're seeing that second wave of the people who were supposedly at the beginning of this unable to get it because of their age and so on and so forth, now getting it because of their exposure. So that just leaves me to think, what's coming in October, what's coming in November, and what's coming in December. Because we've seen this 3-month cycle, you know, a death, some political war, basically, and then an outbreak, or a potential of an outbreak. We've finished the third wave. What's coming next? Is there going to be another major death? Is there going to be another potential for an outbreak or an outbreak? And is there going to be some sort of political war? And I already can tell you right now, I think we're going to see the political war first with the Supreme Court
and the election.
And the election glooming behind it. We're going to see that. So those are my predictions, and my first prediction is going to be that political war, and we're already starting to see it. But I think that concludes probably the saddest episode we will ever do of the Unfiltered podcast. Episode number 6. It was a sad episode. We got through it though. 2020 still has 3 more punches to pull.
We're not even done with September yet.
I was gonna say hopefully not, but we'll see. But I think that's going to conclude today's episode number 6 of the Unfiltered podcast. As always, I have been your host, writer, and executive producer, the lovely Matthew Francis.
And I've been your co-host, writer, and executive producer, Alex Pierce, who is by far the loveliest one here.
Oh my!
So make sure to follow the podcast, leave a review on Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. It's definitely appreciated.
It really is appreciated. And as always, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MattF_media14. That's MattF_media14.
And you can find me on Instagram at AlexPierce_unfiltered and on Twitter at AJPierce243.
Or you can always email us at MatthewFrancisMedia@gmail.com. Thank you everyone for stopping out for episode number 6. The Unfiltered podcast is a production of Matthew Francis Media and its producers, and we will see you next episode.
A great night.